Name's David, and I work security. Or I used to, anyway. This happened about 8 months ago at Riverside Station, an old train depot that got converted into a transit hub back in the 90s. Nothing fancy, just a place where commuters transfer lines. The building itself was built in 1924, which isn't ancient, but it's old enough that things work differently than they used to. I picked up the overnight shift because the pay was decent and I needed the hours. 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. Alone in the station except for the overnight cleaning crew, who'd leave by 9. The job was straightforward. Monitor cameras, do hourly walkthroughs, log anything unusual. In 3 months, the most unusual thing I'd seen was a rat in the East Corridor. The first week was fine. Second week, I noticed something small. The men's bathroom on the second floor had a faucet that would be on when I did my rounds, but nobody ever came up there. The cleaning crew left at 8:30, and the last commuters cleared out by 7. I'd check the bathroom, find the water running, turn it off. Next round at 2 a.m., it'd be on again. I mentioned it to my supervisor. He sent maintenance out. They checked everything. Pipes, fixtures, some kind of sensor malfunction. They said the water pressure might trigger it if the pipe settled. It happened a few more times, then stopped. Around week 4, I noticed something else. There's a bench on the second floor landing, the kind that nobody really uses because it faces a blank wall. Every night around 1 a.m., I'd walk past it during my rounds, and there'd be an indent in it. Like someone had been sitting there. Not a fresh indent necessarily. It was hard to tell with the fluorescent lights, but it was there every single time. I started taking photos on my phone. The indent was always in the same spot, right side of the bench, about where a person's body weight would naturally settle. I didn't report that one. It sounded ridiculous. The third month got stranger. The thermostat on that second floor started dropping. Not everywhere, just in this specific hallway leading to the bathroom and that bench. I'd check it during my rounds. 68 degrees in the main area, 59 degrees in that hallway. I'd adjust it. It would climb back up over the course of an hour. Then the next round, same thing. Temperature around 58 or 59. Management had the HVAC company come out twice. Both times, they said the system was functioning normally. No blockages, no leaks, no mechanical reason for a localized temperature differential. I started dreading that hallway. It wasn't the cold exactly. It was the way the cold felt. Concentrated, deliberate somehow. I know that sounds irrational. I understand how that sounds. By month 4, I'd stopped doing that hallway during my rounds. I'd walk to the bottom of the stairs, look up at the landing, confirm the security gate was locked, and move on. My supervisor asked me why my camera logs showed incomplete rounds. I didn't have a good answer. I told him I was being thorough elsewhere. He wasn't satisfied, but he didn't push it. Then one night, my 4th month in, around 3:15 a.m., I was in the main lobby doing some paperwork at the desk when my monitor flickered. The camera feed from the second floor went to static for maybe 3 seconds, then came back. I checked the other cameras, all normal. I got up and checked the physical camera on that floor. It was mounted fine. Lens was clean, nothing visibly wrong. I went back to my desk and watched the monitor. The feed came back clear, showing the empty hallway, the bench, the bathroom door. Everything normal. Except the bench. The indent was deeper than I'd ever seen it. I pulled up the timeline from the camera system. There was no moment where a person appeared on screen. Just a continuous feed of an empty hallway, and then a much more pronounced depression in that bench seat. No one had walked up those stairs. The second floor door was still locked from the inside. I have the only key, but the indent was there. I didn't go up there that night. I called my supervisor first thing in the morning and told him I quit. I didn't explain why in detail. I just said the job wasn't working out. He asked if I wanted my last check mailed or if I'd come in to pick it up. I never picked it up. My old roommate finally grabbed it for me 3 months later after repeated requests from payroll. I drove past Riverside Station about 5 months after I left. I looked up at that second floor window as I passed. The window that faces the bench. For just a second, I thought I saw someone move past it. But the station was closed that day. They'd started renovations. I don't work security anymore. I process insurance claims now. Daytime hours, surrounded by people. On Monday morning, I woke up and noticed the kitchen cabinets were all open. Not a little bit. Completely open. Every single one. I'd closed them the night before. I remember specifically doing that because I wanted everything organized. I assumed I'd forgotten, or maybe I'd done it while I was tired. I closed them again. The next morning, same thing. Every cabinet hanging open. That time, I actually asked myself if I was losing my mind. I started paying more attention to what I was doing before bed. I'd consciously close each one, count them even. Still, I'd wake up and find them all open again. By the third time, I wasn't unsettled yet. I was frustrated. I started thinking maybe the hinges were faulty, that they'd swing open on their own somehow. I spent a Saturday morning testing each hinge, pushing and pulling the doors. Nothing. They wouldn't open on their own under any amount of shifting or movement. They stayed exactly where I left them. I don't remember making a conscious decision to stop closing them. I just did. One morning I woke up, saw them open, and left them that way. It felt like acceptance somehow, easier than fighting it. Then it started with the doors inside the house. My bedroom door, the bathroom door. I'd close them at night, and by morning they'd be ajar, just enough that I could see through the crack. Not wide open like the cabinets, that would have been too obvious. Just opened enough that I'd notice. Around day 10, I started keeping a notebook. I don't know why exactly. I'd write down what was open when I woke up and what position it was in. I told myself I was being logical, trying to find a pattern. Really, I think I was trying to prove to myself that it was actually happening. One morning I wrote, bedroom door 4 inches, bathroom door 6 inches, kitchen cabinets all open, basement door just cracked. I stopped there. I reread that entry. The basement door. I hadn't been down to the basement since I moved in. The realtor had mentioned it was just storage space, unfinished, and I'd accepted that and never went down there. I didn't avoid it consciously. I just never had a reason to. But I knew I hadn't opened that basement door. I wasn't even sure where the key was. I went downstairs slowly. The basement door was old wood, painted over multiple times, near the kitchen. It was just slightly open, maybe an inch, just enough that I could see darkness beyond the frame. I reached out and pushed it open more. The hinges groaned. It smelled like old stone and something else, something like water or minerals. The stairs descended into black. I didn't go down. I told myself it wasn't necessary. I closed the door and locked it instead. There was a key in the lock. I'd somehow not registered that before. I turned it twice, listening to the lock click into place. That night I slept upstairs with my bedroom door locked from the inside. The next morning, everything was as I'd left it. The bedroom door was locked. The basement door was locked. The kitchen cabinets were closed. For a moment, I felt something like relief. Maybe it was done, whatever it was. Then I went to the kitchen and opened a cabinet at random. Inside, I found a coffee mug. It wasn't mine. I'd bought new mugs when I moved in, plain white ceramic. This one was old, with a faded pattern of blue flowers and a small chip on the rim. I took it out and turned it over. On the bottom was a date, 1987. I opened another cabinet. Another mug, this one with a dark brown stain inside, also from the late 80s. I opened another, and another. By the time I'd checked half of them, I'd found 17 mugs, all of them old. None of them mine, all from decades ago. I stood there holding one of them, trying to think rationally. Maybe they'd been left by the previous owners. Maybe the realtor or someone had put them there as some kind of weird prank. But why would anyone do that? And how had they gotten past me? I called the realtor that afternoon. Her name was Susan Hale. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear something in her voice change the moment I mentioned the mugs. "How many did you find?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe 20. I didn't count them all." "Don't open any more cabinets," she said. I remember exactly how she said it. Very quiet, like someone might be listening. "Don't look for them." "What are they?" I asked. "The previous owner collected them," she said. She collected them obsessively. Her family found almost 300 of them when they cleared the house after she died. After she died? She lived there alone for almost 40 years. When she stopped answering calls, her sister went over and found her in the bedroom. She'd been there for almost a week. The doctor said it was her heart, probably. But she was very thin when they found her. I didn't ask any more questions that day. I hung up and walked back to the kitchen. The cabinets seemed to be waiting for me. I closed them all very carefully and went to get a garbage bag. I didn't throw the mugs away. I don't know why not. Instead, I packed them into a box and put the box in the basement. I had to unlock the basement door to do it, and I left it unlocked after that. It felt important somehow to leave it open. A kind of understanding. The cabinets have been closed ever since. I keep them closed. I buy things in containers instead of boxes. I've rearranged the kitchen 3 times. Some mornings I still find one open just slightly, but it's rare now. Maybe once a month. I'm still in the house. It's been 4 years. I've learned not to ask questions about the previous occupant. I have learned not to look too carefully at things that don't quite match my memories of where I put them. I've learned to live with small wrongnesses, the kind that aren't quite big enough to warrant leaving. Sometimes I think about Susan Hale, the realtor. I wonder if she's warned anyone else. I wonder if she feels guilty about not telling me. I wonder if she thinks the house is haunted, or if she thinks something stranger than that. That some people leave an impression on a place that doesn't require ghosts to explain. I don't believe in ghosts anymore. I believe in habits. I believe in the weight of routine. I believe in how absence can shape a space. And I keep the cabinets closed. It was more like stale air mixed with something metallic. I figured it was just because basements smell like basements. I opened the windows as much as I could. Then I noticed the cold spot. It was in the corner of the apartment, right by the kitchenette. Specific area, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet. I'd be standing there making coffee or washing a dish, and I'd feel the temperature drop. Not dramatically, just enough that I'd rub my arms. I checked for drafts, looked for cracks in the seal around the window. Nothing obvious. I mentioned it to my friend Sarah when she came over. She said maybe the concrete was just a bad insulator. That made sense, so I didn't think about it much. But then the noises started. Not loud, not dramatic, just sounds. I'd hear them mostly at night, between about 2 and 4 a.m. I'm a light sleeper, so I'd wake up. The sounds were like something shifting, like something heavy being dragged across the floor, but very slowly. Or sometimes like the walls were settling. Old buildings do that. I'd listen for a few minutes, tell myself it was normal, and go back to sleep. The thing is, after about 2 weeks of this, I realized I was waking up at the exact same time every night. 2:47 a.m. I don't know how I knew the time so precisely. I just did. I'd open my eyes and think, it's 2:47, and then I'd hear the sound. Not always. Maybe 4 nights out of 7. But it was consistent enough that I started noticing the pattern. I never actually saw anything move. That's what made it strange. The sounds had no visible source. I'd get up, turn on lights, walk around. Everything was where it should be. Nothing disturbed. Nothing out of place. Just the sound, like something in the walls or under the floor. And then nothing. Around week 4, I asked Mr. Chen about the previous tenant again. I made it casual, brought it up when I was paying rent. I asked why they'd left so suddenly. He got quiet. Then he said the guy had only lasted about 3 months. Said he was young, seemed nice, but one day just didn't show up. Left his stuff in the apartment. Mr. Chen had to donate it all, put an ad online, and that was that. When I asked if the guy ever explained why, Mr. Chen said no, Dictia. Never heard from him again. I told myself that didn't mean anything. People move for all sorts of reasons. Maybe he got a job elsewhere. Maybe he was just a flake. But I started sleeping worse. Around day 35, I noticed something different. The cold spot had expanded. It was bigger now, maybe 5 feet by 4 feet. The kitchen area and part of the living space. And the smell, that metallic smell, it was stronger. I got paranoid and checked for gas leaks. Called a service to come out. They found nothing. Guy was friendly about it. Said the apartment checked out fine. No carbon monoxide, no leaks, nothing. But he did mention something. He asked if I'd had the place checked for foundation issues. He'd noticed some old water damage on the concrete in the cold spot area. Nothing active, he said, but old. I asked what would cause that. He said water usually. Underground pipe that had burst, maybe years ago. Or the building just being built in a wet area. He said it was old damage. Nothing current, so I shouldn't worry. I didn't feel reassured. The sounds got more frequent after that. 4 nights became 5 nights. Became almost every night. Always between 2:40 and 2:50 a.m. Always that shifting, dragging sound. And I started to feel tired during the day. Not just normal tired, exhausted. Like I wasn't sleeping well even on the nights I didn't hear the sounds. I mentioned it to my coworker Mark. He asked if I was depressed. I said no, just sleeping poorly. He suggested I try melatonin. I did. It didn't help. Then came the night where I heard something different. It was 2:46 a.m. I woke up, and instead of the usual dragging sound, I heard what sounded like breathing. Not my breathing. I could hear my own breath, and this was different. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall. Slow, wet breathing. Not aggressive, not loud, just present. I sat up in bed. My heart was going. I listened. The breathing continued for maybe 30 seconds, and then it stopped. And then the usual sound came, that dragging, shifting noise. Like whatever had been breathing had moved. I didn't go back to sleep that night. I sat on my couch until sunrise with every light in the apartment on. The next day, I looked up the address online. Public records, news archives, that kind of thing. I didn't find much. No murders or deaths listed at that property. But I did find one article from 1987 about a fire that had damaged the basement area. It said a worker had died, some guy who'd been doing repairs. The article was vague about details. Just said he'd been found by emergency responders. No specific cause of death mentioned. 1987. That was over 30 years ago. I didn't do anything about it immediately. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it was just an old building being an old building. But I also started looking for a new place to live. I looked at apartments online, called around, set up viewings. I needed an excuse to leave that didn't feel crazy. Then, on a Tuesday night, exactly 4 weeks from the breathing incident, something happened that made the decision for me. I was lying in bed around 11 p.m. It was early still, not my usual wake-up time. I was reading something on my phone, trying to tire myself out enough to sleep before the 2:47 a.m. sound started. And I felt something. Cold. Not the cold spot cold. This was different. This was like someone had opened a window in January. A sharp, immediate cold that took my breath away. And it was moving across the apartment. Like a current of air, except there was no air movement. No draft. Just the cold, moving across the room like something was walking. I sat up. The cold moved toward my bed. I could see my breath now, visible in the dark. I was breathing hard. The cold reached the foot of my bed and stopped. I didn't see anything. There was nothing to see. But I felt something there. Not threatening exactly, but present. Like something was standing at the foot of my bed, looking at me. I got up. I didn't run, didn't panic outwardly, but I moved fast. I went to the light switch and flipped it on. The cold was gone. Just like that. The temperature snapped back to normal. Nothing visible. Nothing out of place. I packed a bag right then. I called Sarah and asked if I could stay at her place. She said yes, without asking questions. I think something in my voice told her I was serious. I left the apartment and didn't go back. I called Mr. Chen the next day and told him I was breaking my lease. I said it was a personal situation, nothing about the apartment. He didn't fight me on it. He said okay, and that was it. No argument about the deposit or the remaining rent. When I asked him to return my security deposit, he did it immediately. No questions. I'm not saying the apartment was haunted. I don't know what it was, but I know what I experienced, and I know I couldn't stay there. The guy who lived there before me probably experienced the same things. Maybe he lasted 3 months because that's how long it took for him to hit his limit. I've looked at the listing a few times since then. The apartment is still for rent. The price keeps dropping. There's usually high turnover with basement units, I know that. But this one seems to turn over faster than most. I'll never know for certain what was in that building. But I know it was something, and I know it wasn't done with me. If I'd stayed much longer, I honestly don't know what would have happened. But I could feel the difference. My hands would get cold enough that I'd have to put on gloves even though I was wearing a long-sleeve shirt. I mentioned it to Derek, another maintenance guy who worked days. He said he'd never noticed anything, but he also said he tried not to spend much time down there if he could help it. I asked him why. He wouldn't give me a straight answer. Just said the older guys talked about that section being off, but he didn't believe in any of that stuff. After about a week of the temperature drop, I started hearing sounds I couldn't identify. Not voices. More like movement. The sound of something shifting or sliding against the concrete walls. It happened when I was in that corridor, but when I'd stop and listen carefully, it would stop too. The moment I started moving again, I'd hear it. Like something was moving in sync with me, just out of sight. I was seriously considering asking for a different shift when the valve incident happened. There's a maintenance valve in that west corridor. A large shut-off valve for the main water line serving the old pediatric wing. One morning, I was scheduled to inspect it as part of routine checks. I walked into the corridor, and the valve was leaking. Not a slow drip. Water was actively pouring out of the connection point. This was strange because I had been down there 3 days prior, and the valve was fine. Completely fine. I checked my logs. No one else had been assigned to that section. I called it in immediately because a leak like that could cause serious water damage above, and I waited for Derek to come help me. While I waited, I noticed something else. The floor around the valve was wet, obviously, but there were also handprints in the moisture on the wall. Small ones, child-sized. They were smudged and old-looking, like they'd been there for a while, but had just become visible because of the water spray making everything damp. I have kids. I know what a child's handprint looks like. These were definitely that. Derek arrived about 15 minutes later. When I showed him the handprints, he got very quiet. He told me to help him shut the valve off and then we could talk. We got it closed, and the water stopped. As it was draining, Derek pointed to something I hadn't noticed. On the wall behind the valve, carved into the concrete, were letters. They were old, weathered, maybe from decades ago. I could barely make them out, but it looked like initials. A J and what might have been an M. Derek said we needed to report this to the hospital administrator, not just our supervisor. I asked him why. He finally told me something. Back in the 1950s, when they built that expansion, there was an incident. He didn't have all the details, but he'd heard from an old-timer named Frank, who retired years ago, that a young patient, a girl, had gotten lost in the tunnels during construction. The workers found her 3 days later, hypothermic and delirious. The hospital covered it up because the tunnels weren't supposed to be accessible to patients. But Frank said the girl never fully recovered mentally. She spent the rest of her life in a state hospital about 50 miles away. We filed the report. The hospital sent someone down to document the handprints and the carved initials. They took photographs. They had a structural engineer look at the valve. It was old, he said, but there was no mechanical reason for it to fail that day. Not really. The hospital decided to seal off that section of tunnel. New wall, concrete, the works. They rerouted the water line through an alternate path. I was reassigned to work in the upper tunnels near the basement level. I didn't ask questions. I still work at Ashford. The rest of the tunnels are fine. Normal temperature, normal lights, normal sounds. But I still think about that corridor sometimes. I think about a child in the dark, cold tunnels 60 years ago, confused and scared. And I think about the fact that we never do really disappear from the places we're lost in. We just become part of them. I quit about 2 months after they sealed the tunnel. Got a job at a different facility. Sometimes I wonder if Derek still gets assigned that way, or if the whole tunnel network still bothers him. I never asked. Some things are better left unexplained. But I never forgot those handprints, or the feeling I had down there when the lights were flickering. The feeling of something waiting for acknowledgement. Something that had been waiting for a very long time. I took the job at Pembroke Library because it paid well, and the work seemed straightforward. I was hired as the night custodian, starting at 9 p.m. and finishing at 6 in the morning. The building was old, built in 1924, but it was well maintained. 3 stories, about 40,000 square feet.
I'd be alone most nights except for the security guard who made rounds every 2 hours. My first week was uneventful. I'd sweep the reading rooms, empty trash, polish the wooden railings on the main staircase. The library had a particular smell: old paper, furniture polish, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something like dust that had settled into the building's bones decades ago. I got used to it. Around my third week, I noticed something small. The returned book cart in the sorting room would be in different positions than where I left it. Not dramatically different. Maybe 2 feet to the left or rotated at an angle. I assumed the security guard was moving it during his rounds, so I asked him about it. He said he never went into the sorting room, just checked the exterior doors and the main floor every 2 hours. He seemed genuinely confused by the question. I started marking the cart's position more deliberately. I'd line it up with a specific tile on the floor and note where it was. 3 times over 2 weeks, I found it moved. The security guard's rounds were logged. I checked the log each morning. Every time the cart moved, he'd been nowhere near the building during the time window it had to have happened. Then I started noticing the books. The library used a cart system where returned books were shelved during the day by volunteers. At night, I was just supposed to process returns that came through the after-hours slot and load them onto the cart for morning sorting. One Tuesday, I found 3 books on the third-floor history section that hadn't come through the return slot. They were just sitting on a shelf, spines facing outward, neatly placed. All 3 were about local history, specifically about the Pembroke area from the 1950s. I mentioned this to my supervisor during the day shift. She said returns sometimes got misfiled, and not to worry about it. But it bothered me because these books had been checked in. There were due dates on the cards inside them, and they were all due 2 days prior. I became more methodical. I started a small notebook where I'd list anything out of place. A chair pushed in at a study table when I'd swept around it earlier. A light on in the microfilm room when I was certain I'd turned them all off. Pencils arranged in the reference desk drawer in a specific pattern, not scattered the way I'd left them. The pattern escalated around week 6. I came in one night and found the entire biography section on the second floor reorganized. Not reshelved in the proper order, but rearranged into clusters based on subject matter. It had taken someone hours. The Dewey Decimal System had been completely ignored. Someone had deliberately sorted them by hand. By theme. Biographies of educators in one area, biographies of businessmen in another, musicians in another. I reported this. My supervisor said maybe the day volunteers had done inventory. I pulled the volunteer log. No one had signed in that day. The building had been locked from 6 p.m. onward. I considered quitting. I genuinely did. But I also felt something I'm struggling to describe. Not quite compelled, but curious. And maybe stubborn. I wanted to understand what was happening. So I started staying after my shift ended. At 6 a.m., when I would normally leave, I'd hide instead. I'd go into the storage room behind the main desk and wait. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. The first time I did it, nothing happened. I sat there for 2 hours and heard nothing except the building's normal creaks and the hum of the HVAC system. The second time, I heard footsteps. They were on the second floor, moving slowly between the stacks. The footsteps were deliberate and measured. They'd stop, pause for maybe 10 seconds, then continue. They moved through the biography section, the section that had been reorganized, and then progressed to other areas. I stayed in the storage room. I didn't come out. The footsteps continued for about 40 minutes, then gradually faded. I never heard them leave. They just stopped being there. I told myself it was the security guard, but I'd checked his route before. He never came inside the building between my shift and the day crew arriving. He checked doors and windows only. On my 8th week, I came in and found a book sitting on my custodian cart. Not in the sorting pile, just sitting there on top. It was a staff reference book about the library's history, published internally in 1987. I knew this book. It was usually kept in the administrative office upstairs. I'd never touched it. I opened it. There were annotations in the margins. Careful handwriting in black ink. Notes in several different places, all in the biographies section discussion. The notes were about donors, specific donors from the 1950s. Names. The handwriting had underlined one name 3 times, Margaret Ashford. I searched the system for Margaret Ashford. She'd been a major donor to the library in the 1950s. She'd funded an entire renovation. There were photos of her in the old donation plaques near the main entrance. She died in 1957. That night, I didn't hide. I brought the book and I sat at the reference desk with all the lights on. I opened the book and I waited. Around 3 a.m. I heard the footsteps again. They came from upstairs, same deliberate pace. They moved through the biography section for a while. Then I heard them coming down the stairs. Slowly, carefully. They stopped at the top of the main staircase. The footsteps didn't come down. They just stopped. I sat there at the desk, the book in front of me, and I waited. My heart was going, but I tried to keep myself still. After maybe 2 minutes, I heard a sound I can't quite describe. It wasn't quite a sigh, and it wasn't quite a breath. It was almost like air being released from somewhere deep in the building's structure. The footsteps turned around and went back upstairs. I left the book on the reference desk that morning. My supervisor found it and returned it to the administrative office. She asked why I'd had it. I said I was doing some research on the library's history. That was 3 months ago. I still work the night shift. The cart still moves. The books still get reorganized. The footsteps still come on certain nights, but the annotations have stopped. And I've never found another message. I think whatever was trying to tell someone something found who they needed to tell. And now they're just staying, moving through the building at night, keeping their section organized the way they preferred, existing in the quiet spaces. I don't feel afraid anymore. Sometimes I hear the footsteps and I just keep working. I leave the biography section alone. And on nights when I hear that exhaled breath at the top of the stairs, I acknowledge it silently and go back to what I'm doing. Because some presences aren't hostile. They're just trying to remain, the only way they know how.
Noticed the wife kept looking at the thermostat, and the attorney, the older gentleman, was sitting with his arms crossed tight. It was still probably 65 degrees in that room. I could see their breath getting faint. Is anyone else cold? I asked. The husband said yes. The wife said she felt fine, but she was rubbing her arms. I suggested we move to a different conference room. I was about to stand up when the wife suddenly stopped looking at the thermostat and looked directly at the empty chair. The seat I had originally pulled out for her. The one next to the window. Her eyes just stayed on it for a few seconds. "Let's stay," she said quietly. "Let's finish here." I looked at her husband. He wasn't looking at the chair. He was looking at his wife. We continued, but the energy in the room had changed. It wasn't that anything happened. It was that nothing did. It was completely silent except for my voice. No one asked questions. No one wrote anything down. The attorney's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle working. When we finished, they thanked me. They were polite, but the wife wouldn't look back at the room as she left. Mr. Fletcher called me the next Monday. The deal fell apart. The client's attorney had advised them against the purchase entirely. He'd said something about wanting to avoid conflict. That's what he told the clients. But the wife, apparently, had told her husband she didn't want to own that space. She didn't want to put employees there. When he asked her why, she said something felt wrong. I had planned to ask her what she meant, but I never got the chance. A week after the meeting, I decided to go into the boardroom myself. It was a Friday night around 8. I was catching up on emails at my desk, and most people had left. The 14th floor was pretty empty. I went down that hallway alone. When I opened the door, the cold was immediate and complete. But I expected that. What I didn't expect was the smell. It was so much stronger now. Definitely copper. And something else. Something like dust and time. I didn't turn on the lights. The city lights came through the windows, enough to see by. I sat in one of the chairs, not the one the client had refused, a different one, and I just sat there. The temperature didn't change. The smell didn't get worse. But after I'd been sitting for about 3 minutes, I realized I could see something. A mark on the mahogany table. It was right in front of the seat by the window. A long, dark stain. It looked old, worn into the wood grain itself. I'd spent an hour in that room setting up. I'd looked at every inch of that table. That mark hadn't been there. I left. I didn't run or panic. I just got up and walked out and closed the door behind me. When I got back to my desk, I did something I should have done earlier. I searched the internet for the building's history. It took me about 40 minutes of clicking through old articles, but I found it. In 1987, a financial analyst named David Chen had worked for a firm in this building. Not the same company, but the same floor. He'd been told he was being terminated. According to the article, he'd gathered his things and gone into the nearest conference room. He was there for about an hour. Someone heard him on the phone, voice getting quieter and quieter. When security finally went in to check on him, he was dead. They called it a suicide, but they never specified how. The article was vague, just said he'd been found at the conference table. I don't know if it was the boardroom. The building had been renovated since then. Rooms reconfigured, walls moved. But I think it was. I think he sat at that table. I quit 2 weeks later. Not because I was afraid of him, if he was even there. I quit because I couldn't stop thinking about what the client's wife had seen. What she'd looked at when she stared at that empty chair. And I couldn't stop wondering if other people had seen it too. If that's why they wouldn't book the room. I never went back to see if that stain was still there. Some things, once you know, you don't need to know more about.